We have had just a very inspiring workshop in which we discussed global political economic context in which agroecology is emerging. But we also went to micro episodes like the Solares and the Milpa in Mexico, several Tunisian villages. We went to the cultivation practices in Malaya. We discussed the transhumance sheep herds in Spain. All very interesting. And of course, the different directions research is taken have been presented. Several parameters and indicators have been discussed. But what above all came out of this workshop is a dazzling array of questions. Questions about the entry points, about the factors enabling the emergence of agroecology, the maintenance of it, questions about the specific trajectories it's following, questions about the starting points, questions about the trajectory, about the historical process, about the unfolding over time. And of course, these questions also jump into political issues, many of which came in the final discussion again to the fore. Also putting into discussion the role of science. What is science to do? How can science take its responsibility? How can it connect to different practices and to different movements? Now, let me say that having these questions is very, very important. They set the agenda, they energize science. It is what having questions is what moves science forward, especially if you have the right questions, of course, and that is always an issue in itself. At the same time, it applies that the many questions that have been arranged so far do not have clear, definitive answers, let alone that there are single answers to all these questions. There is instead a multiplicity of answers. There's a multiplicity of experiences, of examples, and these are highly diverse among each other. There are also contradictory experiences, contradictory points of view. There are many question marks. And I would argue it cannot be different than that. It reflects agroecology as a transitional process, which is multidimensional, which is multi-level, which is multi-actor, which implies different bodies of knowledge. Knowledge from the fields, knowledge from the laboratories, and it's highly difficult to combine all this. It implies contextual differences. It implies long-term processes in which meaning and the significance and the impact of different issues all are constantly changing. It is an intent agroecology to transform agriculture. It's by regrounding it, and this is very clear, on ecological principles and also in human values that center on care, that taking care for the environment, taking care for living nature, taking care for the process of production that is done in a neatly, well-organized way, taking care for the people that are involved in it, or in more general terms, human values that reflect social justice and gender equality. Given this situation, I would above all argue that even if it's difficult to go to more precise definitions of agroecology, I would argue that agroecology is in the first place a promise. Yeah, it's a promise of an agriculture that is not cannibalizing landscapes, is not destroying biodiversity, that is not heating the climate, that is not excluding people, that is not a threat to public health. Agroecology is the promise of a new way of farming, that is sustainable, that is grounded on the ecology, that's accessible, that is governed in a democratic way, and that allows people involved to make true their emancipatory aspirations. And this applies especially for the downtrodden, for the marginalized people, for young people, for the women involved in agriculture. For them, agroecology can become a promising way forward. It's a very practical promise. Let's be clear about that. It's not about talking of a ghost somewhere in the skies. It's a very practical promise. As Antonio Andrioli, a friend from Brazil who participated in the there you are in the workshop, clearly argued that in Brazil, where agroecology is inspiring and a strong reality closely connected to the MST, which is part of La Via Campesina. It's in Brazil, then it's a very material promise. Yeah, it's very much bound to the earth. If it's discussed with the people over there, as Antonio made clear, yeah, it's about lowering the costs of production. It's about the maintenance and improvement of the natural resources. It's about obtaining a better income. There is nothing abstract about it. It's about very concrete, very material, very socio-material needs, I would argue. It's a promise also that binds people together, yeah, that gives body to social movements, and that interlinks different groups, that interlinks consumers, that with groups of peasants, with parts of civil society that all want to move in this new direction. And when I say that it's a promise, then I'm not talking about a grand design situated somewhere in the future, yeah, but I'm talking about many-sided agricultural practices around the world, in which this promise of agroecology is laying dormant. It's hidden in practice. Yeah, it's already there. What we have to do is to uncover it, to make it visible, to help to unfold it further, to strengthen it, to connect the different practices amongst them, so that strong movements are emerging and can become a factor, a lever in changing the dominant regimes and in changing society. It is already there. It's hidden. I have here 4 images. On the left, you see a Frisian farming family, dairy farmers who are changing over to pure grazing. That is no imports anymore into the farm of concentrates, yeah, containing soy coming from Brazil, not using anymore chemical fertilizers, putting grazing and their meadow central states and using these internal resources as the engine of farming and its development. Then you see a herder from the Abruzze in Italy, yeah, who knows very well the hills, the mountains, who knows, yeah, knowledge is crucial here, when a specific type of grass is available, where it is available, and how much sheep can go there, yeah, and how to make sure that it is reproducing this available biomass. This is and then we move to the next one. That's about a Peruvian peasant couple, who have been fighting all their lives for dignity, for the possibility to send their children to school, who have been facing poverty, yeah, and proud that they could build their own herd of sheep, that they can produce their own feed and fodder. So to bring autonomy into a very concrete practice, into a reality that's important for them, and the dignity. And then finally, we see on the right a Chinese woman bringing parts of the harvest home in order to feed the small animals and especially the pigs. And the nice thing here, the commonality, is of course feed and fodder, and the available commons for herding the herds of sheep. Yeah? This refers in a more general way to having an autonomous resource base, yeah, constructed and controlled and developed by the involved peasant families themselves. Yeah, for them, this is crucial, and it's one of the defining features, of course, of peasant agriculture that's not built on large commodity flows that come from agribusiness and then return to other agribusinesses. Yeah, it is independent. This associates these images and the self-controlled resource base. It relates with autonomy, with resilience, with resistance. For these people, having their own feed and fodder and biomass available for their herd, yeah, it is their line of defense. Yeah? It's how they can defend themselves in a hostile world. Yeah, they are not simple victims, but actively resisting that hostile world through the development of the peasant units of production. This kind of agriculture we have seen is peasant agriculture is an outcome of co-production. Yeah, that is the encounter and the ongoing interaction of the social and the natural, of humans and living nature. Yeah, and the two are interacting and mutually transforming each other. And this implies, this is an image developed by Victor Toledo from Mexico. This implies a double process of exchange. There is on the one hand exchange with nature. Yeah, the natural resources are being used, are converted into food and other useful products that then through economic exchange are distributed into the wider society. And then you see how the peasant unit of production represents the axis between nature and society, between and this applies not only for one single unit, but there are many of them located on the borderline of nature, ecology, and society. And of course, there is also a lot of interaction between the different peasant units of production. There is reciprocity, there is mutual help, there are often communities, there are villages that tie people together. Now, the important point is that we all know that through modernization and through the green revolution processes and through many current developments, the part of nature has increasingly been marginalized. Ecological exchange has been put to the margins, and agroecology in this respect is making nature enter again into the processes of production and the labor processes. It's regrounding farming on nature, on living nature with all its capriciousness. So you need a very artisanal approach. You have to know nature, you have to know your animals, you have to know your fields. And this requires really, this cannot be standardized. This is really what is, you need the peasant units of production to do so. Now, turning back to agroecology as promise, that promise that is hidden in and often hidden in reality. In the milpas and the solares, I already mentioned, that is hidden in the different pictures I showed you in my first slide. It's hidden in many practices like multiple cropping, intercropping, mulching, using local seeds, in composting, in the on-farm production of the needed protein for your animals. It's hidden there, it's often damaged. And what we can do is to make it visible, to develop it further. It's also very clear that all these agroecological practices or proto-agroecological practices that are tightly interwoven amongst each other, but sometimes isolated, but they connect also these practices with the livelihoods of people. Yeah, they are not somewhere outside there, but they are related with the herder from the Abruzzo, with the Frisian family I showed you. It's related with the Chinese woman, and so on and so forth. It's part of their livelihoods. It coincides with their interests. It coincides with their prospects. It's their knowledge that is being used. It is a part of their culture. And it relates with their agency, and also it relates with their pride, as is shown in this a painting from Ao Sun, a Chinese painter, which in a certain way symbolizes the agency, the willingness, but also the pride of having made this beautiful landscape with many terraces, which is colored differently through the different crops. This is the many-sided outcome of co-production, I would argue. And you see, it's not being done alone. It is together with others who are present in this picture. And it's not only about men. Evidently, it's as much about women, about the capability of these women. And you see here an interesting detail. She's managing an electric tractor, a three-wheel tractor, which has been very helpful for peasant women in China to enlarge their presence in farming, to have a decisive role, and this is used also to travel to the markets, the nearby markets, sometimes further away, to bring their produce to the market. So that's all there. Now, I've been talking about agroecology as a promise. The big question then is, how can this promise unfold? How can it be made true? In doing so, we need a social driver, and evidently we talk then about the peasantries. Here, this is symbolized with this image from one of the settlements of the Movimento do Sem Terra, the MST in Brazil. This is a major social driver of the agroecological realities and potentials now present in Brazil. And when we're talking about the peasantries, mind you, we are talking about 500 million units of peasant production throughout the world. And if you calculate with 4 people related to each unit, then we are talking about 2 billion peasants. And for them, I would argue that agroecology is a main prospect for them. On the one hand, they desperately need ways forward. On the other hand, at the same time, they know very well that industrialized agriculture is absolutely no way forward for them. It excludes them, it destroys their livelihoods, it destroys their ecosystems on which they depend. Therefore, you have to occupy spaces. Occupy, you have to resist, you have to produce, but to produce in your own way. And you have to cooperate with movements, with citizens, with sometimes with parts of the state, sometimes with consumers. Here you have in a nutshell the political program that emerges out of agroecology, and which makes agroecology into a major line of defense. Lines of defense that are strengthened through the cooperation with consumers, through peasant markets, but also strengthened through the cooperation with scientists and parts of science. What then is the role of science in agroecology? Let me be very clear on that. It's to explore, in the first place, the hidden potentials that are included in agroecology, in the existing practices of agroecology. These are to be shown, these are to be documented, and you also have to document steps forward that are being made. You have to show the potentials that are entailed in the many micro episodes. You have to cooperate to tie them together into a movement forward that can change, as I already said, the reigning socio-technical regimes. It's of course not whatever science that can do this. You need a specific science, not the technocratic agricultural sciences that are dominant in the world. We need a science, an agroecological science that is having a different locus, meaning that what it studies, but also is having a different focus. It's having a different method. It is studying things in a different way. For instance, it is not studying the natural and social resources according to their intrinsic principles. It's not isolating the many elements that together constitute farming by focusing on the intrinsic, assumedly intrinsic qualities of the soil, on the intrinsic qualities of fodder, on the intrinsic mechanisms of cows, and so on and so forth, of plants. It's a relational science. It focuses on the relations between the different resources. It focuses on the relation between good manure, good animal produce, and soil biology. And then it focuses on the relations between soil biology and the crops that are growing on it. And then it focuses on how these qualities of the crops relate to the animals that are being fed with these crops. You see, the relational patterns that together constitute a well-functioning farm are put center stage. And this is completely different from what technocratic science is doing. It is separating all this in separate elements. And on the other hand, it's very close to farmers' knowledge, which is also basically relational. You know each element through its relation, through its impact, through its connection with other elements. And it makes it into a dynamic science. I will give you one example of these interrelating elements, and I will do this by using the example of a territorial cooperative in Friesland in the Netherlands. It started as a very small initiative of 36 farmers some 30 years ago. It's now a huge territorial cooperative for governing the landscape, for improving the environment, for improving farming, and for maintaining nature and biodiversity. You see in this photograph, it's a hedgerow landscape, and these hedgerows are the carrier of an impressive biodiversity. There's a lot of bird life, there are deers, there's a very rich soil biology, there is a very rich flora all over the place, there is continuity in this richness. But according to the dominant agro-scientific paradigm, these are just hindrances, that they should be removed to make place for optimal farming. Farmers instead here opted to maintain this landscape. It's dear to them, and what they did is adapt farming to this landscape. Instead of the other way, erase the landscape to make place for a type of industrial farming. So the peasants in this area were involved in remolding their resources. They were breeding cattle. That is, I will not go into the technicalities of this, which is not highly productive as Holstein cattle, but which is very efficient. It's not producing on the highest assumed yield level, but in terms of efficiency, it produces less, but it needs also far less input. So it's a very sturdy and efficient animals that fit with the landscape. And the same applies, for instance, to the right type of mechanization. You have to operate in small fields, difficult fields, and they found combinations between the mechanization and the labor input, which is summarized here at the left of these graphs. These are substitution curves. but again, I will not go into the technicalities, but they adapted the organization of the farm, the way it is combines labor and mechanization in a very specific way. This is another outcome of co-production, that you mold your natural and social resources in a way that is suitable. And this applies, and here we enter even a highly sensitive, political sensitive point in the Netherlands. I think this is one of the most beautiful graphs out of the world. Let me explain it. To produce milk, you need nitrogen, true? And this nitrogen might be contained in concentrates, and it might be contained in chemical fertilizer. This is just a standard view. And then what we have here is, for a particular farm, Hoeksma's farm, the amount of nitrogen, the total amount that is needed to produce a standard amount of milk, 100,000 kilogram of milk. And it started here in 79, and then come the years that follow. First, the typical trajectory of further industrialization. More and more and more nitrogen was used. And then at a certain point, they became very upset, very worried about the quality of the grasslands. That deteriorated very much. And so they started a search to reduce the amount of external nitrogen. They did so in a step-by-step way, from 86, 87, and so on until 92. What you see here, by the way, they moved in an agroecological direction. What you see here, by the way, is that the change to agroecology is not made in one step. It does not occur overnight, but it is organized as a search, step-by-step change of your process of production, of the conditions under which you operate. But it moves slowly, careful, but irresistible. And the beauty of this is that between 85 and 92, in the previous century, they were able to reduce the total amount of nitrogen coming from outside from more or less 7,000 to a little bit less than 3,000. Very sharp decrease over time through little steps, invisible for outsiders, but very beneficial in this farm. And the beauty is that when old Hoeksma stopped farming, he passed away. His two sons, Dictus and Douwe, continued as the farm. And here are the data reflecting nitrogen use in this century from 2013 to 2017. And they continued along the road already designed by the old farmer. So they went ahead. How could they do this? And here comes the key: by improving the internal resources, by improving soil biology, and they did so by improving the animal manure, obtained through the production, improved manure, feeding the soil, giving improved soil biology, giving an improved growth of grass, improved silage, which allows for better feeding the animals. It was different relation between carbon and nitrogen, but again, I will not go into the technicalities here. And so they could perfectly change over into the agroecological direction. This is one of the many hidden beauties that lay dormant in the fields, and that we have to uncover and build upon. I will return to this. Now, in science supporting this type of changes, we also need courage. We also need the courage to ask the nasty and the tough questions, which normally are left to dominant science. For instance, more or less the question: nowadays is taboo in agroecological debates. Who will feed the world? Who will feed the growing population? That is seen as a very technocratic question. I would argue it's not. Yep, since we can very well demonstrate that the potential of agroecology is to feed far better the world than industrialized agriculture can ever do. And surely if we take into account questions as where is the enlarged production to be located? Here in the global north or in the global south? How is it to be done? Through further industrializing or through a turn to agroecology? And whom are to do this? Peasants, peasant women, social movements? Yeah, these are very relevant questions. And these should not be avoided, absolutely not. Here is one question that played an important role in Peru, a country I love very much, which preceded the current debates. The word agroecology at that time as yet did not exist, but it shows in a few words how between 1974 and 1994, peasant agriculture was able to develop very much the yields. Yeah, yield should not be a taboo, should not be an ugly word, but part of the pride of Peruvian peasants was with the increase they realized in the outcomes of their process of production. Yeah, they proudly said, we are able to paint the fields green, and we are able to feed the cities. This also relates to current political problems. Here you have an image of current nitrogen struggles in the Netherlands, where the entrepreneurial and the industrial part of agriculture is completely denying that there is existing something called nitrogen problem. According to them, it's not existing, and there should be no policy refraining nitrogen use. And this translates into a very ugly right-wing populist type of party and movement. And the remarkable thing is that in the meantime, following amongst others examples as I showed you from Hoeksma, the more peasant-like farmers and networks put together their findings, and the outcome was this. And this is dynamite in the political discussion. It shows that the entrepreneurial, these are data from 2022, that industrial farms, the entrepreneurial farms, have a total import of nitrogen of 343 kilogram per hectare, which is an enormous amount. And the more peasant-like farms that are moving in an agroecological direction, like I showed you, used 197 kilograms, a difference of 42%, meaning that if the peasant-like way of farming would be generalized in the Netherlands, there would indeed be not anymore a severe crisis. This shows the strength, the potential, the promise of peasant agriculture. And it shows how moving in an agro-ecological direction and peasantry coincide. Okay, a few last words about agroecology as a science that can help to make these promises become true. Why can agroecological science do this? I really think it's a superior type of knowledge of science, because in the first place, it systematically integrates the social sciences, the social science approach with the natural science approach, which turns out to be time and again very difficult and technocratic agricultural sciences, in which there is a clear hierarchy. The natural, and then far below follows the social. Agroecology as a science engages in promising practices helping to unfold them, strengthen them, showing also to the public and to policy the potentials that are entailed. It helps to link them. It helps to construct forms of polycentric governance, indeed. It is documenting what is otherwise becoming invisible. It is superior because it focuses on the relational aspects of farming, which are already mentioned, and which imply the moldability, the malleability of both the social and the natural. It is not perceiving agriculture as part of a hierarchical system, as is the case in traditional science, in technocratic science, a hierarchical system that goes from the field via the farm and the region towards the national food system, as they call it, or to the global world market, and then assumes that there's a kind of determinism that goes from above towards the lower levels of aggregation. In agroecology, as science, it's far richer. It assumes and demonstrates that there is interaction and remolding and renegotiation in both directions. It is not only the higher level of aggregation that defines how farming is to be done in the fields, but also farms and farmers and farmers women can affect these higher levels of aggregation. They can change it. They can create new peasant markets that are an alternative to the dominant markets, and so on and so forth. This is called panarchy by Paulo Titonel, a very gifted agroecological scientist. Meaning that you have not a one-way determinism, but there is a moldability in two directions. All this implies that also that agroecology as science is a very joyful enterprise. It implies the exploration of new areas so far unknown, and it's attractive to the involved students, but also to the involved activists, to scientists, to peasant producers who join into the common research programs. It is transformative, it's performative, it's attractive, it's joyful. So I'm happy to be part of that. I'm sure that you will also enjoy very much to be part of it as well. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the idea of the promise. We heard in the earlier presentations a lot about peasants being old and a lot of young people leaving the countryside, going to the city, being attracted by more income, urban living, and so on. And I wonder if you could say something about peasant agriculture and agroecology. Also, can you give examples where this also serves as a promise for rural youth? Maybe also just some general statements about how agroecology can be a promise for young people.
If you compare the statistics of Brazil, the census data of now and 20 years, 30 years ago, then it comes out that in the meantime, 400,000 new peasant units of production, new farms have been created. Being contained in these settlements I've shown on the photograph, 300,000 to 400,000. Being developed by young people who go there, as they literally say, because they want a dignified life. They do not want their children to grow up as their Portuguese expression goes, as lixura humana, as human dirt. In the favelas, in the big cities, life is ugly, life is difficult. So people find their emancipation to a degree in the move towards the countryside. The interesting thing is that you see this in large parts of Europe as well, not that massive, but it's starting. Young people going to the countryside, trying to build up a farm. Sometimes it are small farms, but with huge potential that's increasingly well documented. For instance, in a beautiful study of Kevin Morel of France. In Italy, there are very nice studies about all this. Young people, many young people are interested, and if there are good examples, that life can be attractive in the countryside and that you can earn good money, then for sure more people will follow. And that old people disappear and take with them the bad habits of industrialized farming is, I would argue, no problem. Maybe a bit crude to say it that way, but that's how history probably will go. And you know, one other detail following this issue, which of course is in a way crucial, I refer to this dance through time that was made on the Hoeksma farm, reducing the nitrogen input. You remember? And then I showed how the two sons, Douwe and Dictus, with their families, continued to farm. You know why? It's very simple. Because they like to be involved in this adventure of making step by step a new agroecological reality. That's far more attractive than following the stupid routine of industrialized agriculture. Yeah, that makes agriculture attractive. And the more this happens, I'm sure the more young people will be part of their time or full time or part of their life or all their life be in agriculture.
Yeah, I would like to ask you, you talk about and you showed some picture about peasant animal production systems, and I would like to ask you, how do you think from agroecology we can defend pastoralism, extensive animal production systems and decent animal production systems from the discourse of reduction of the consumption of the animal products?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That refers to a very interesting debate, of course. My personal position is that I think that the large feedlots, where you have thousands of animals being fattened and which are built on ongoing flows of commodities, of commoditized feed and fodder, etc., are very disgusting, and should appear as soon as possible. I think that in peasant-like agriculture, where very often the animals are being even being perceived as persons. Yeah, they have the names. They represent. Although they are non-humans, but there is a reciprocal relation between the peasant producer and his or her animals, and they care well for the animals. And I think that for the many hilly areas and mountain areas, for instance here in Europe, the only use they can have is having animals on it for meat production and for milk production. Now, if this meat is consumed, I have no problem with it. It's the individual choice of each and everybody, and we all know that total meat production is to go down considerably. Yeah, we cannot continue this way, but the people who like to eat every now and then good meat, because we need to maintain grazing in the hills and the mountains. In the midst of Italy, behind the city of Assisi, beautiful city, known for San Francesco, there is a mountain, the Monte Subasio, and it's having the richest variety of orchids and an enormous quantities of orchids. It's the richest nature reserve in Europe. You know why this mountain, this Monte Subasio, is so rich in orchids? Because there is grazing. Not grazing in whatever way, but grazing of canina animals, which makes for a very tasty, very good meat. And yes, people like that and can eat it responsibly.
Thank you, Jan, for sharing the joyful domain of agroecology. You started with presence, a hidden presence that we need to discover and open up. But how about the absence? I mean, not every peasant groups have this possibility, like talk about wars of Syrian farmers or Ukrainian farmers or Indonesian farmers who has to be displaced because of electrical car industries, nickel, mining, etc. Well, it's not that I'm hoping that the Friesland peasant will save the Indonesian peasants, for example. I believe in indigenous social movement, effectiveness of social movement. It has to be within Indonesia itself, for example. But then how would you imagine the political of the peasants beyond securing own, for example, this Friesland peasants, how much they care about stopping the Dutch aggressive industry outside the Netherlands itself. So it's a kind of, this is something like difficult to answer, but just in thinking about this Heidelberg high school students protesting in front of Heidelberg, stakeholders meeting for stopping this operation in Indonesian karst region. So it's kind of, I personally think that there is a particular ego in this peasant movement but I just want to, what would you imagine about this political?
Now, let me mention 3 points. And I'm fully aware that I cannot completely respond, not completely answer your question. Yeah, it's entering into a debate that is very important. But my first point is that, as a matter of fact, in many parts of the world, peasant agriculture is very much damaged. Yeah, a lot is lost, a lot is forgotten. And sometimes this is even irreversible, where soil fertility, soil biology has been completely destroyed. Yeah, it's very difficult to restart, although there are endeavors to do so, but it's not easy. In some parts of the world, peasant agriculture possibly has to be reinvented from scratch. Even if that sounds very contradictory, yeah, it sounds like something that you could not do. And of course, there's a second point. All this has international ramifications. Yeah, the problems in the Netherlands, the problems that we have with the nitrogen crisis, it links directly to Brazil. To soy production and the destruction of the Cerrado and the Amazon. And it links to the energy crisis because chemical fertilizers need fossil energy, especially gas for being produced. Yeah, so this fight is not only about nitrogen, but it's a kind of prelude for the fight on the climate crisis. So it's not peanuts what is happening here, as it is not peanuts. The peasant answer developed in this struggle. When it comes to these international ramifications, you point to Heidelberg, Indonesia. Yes, very promising. I found it very promising that you can trace the change of young farmers in the 1970s and 1980s in the Netherlands to new ways of farming. First organic farming, then broaden it to multifunctionality, to agroecology. You mentioned it, making new cooperatives, making markets. You can trace, in many cases, you can trace it back to them visiting the global south and having seen the other side of their position, their initial position. Yeah, they understood, hey, it's not that simple that we are right and they are wrong. It's far more complicated. Yeah, so the global south experiences very often have been a trigger for people, for farmers in the north to try out these step-by-step changes. I was always also impressed that peasant farmers, even without knowing the language of the other, yeah, they very easily can join in the labor process, join in milking, in harvesting the hay, yeah, and through a kind of bodily knowledge, yeah, they can make themselves understand. Even at that level, you see very promising things. And then the third point, when it comes to the larger changes, well, I sustain that anyway. Organizations like, or especially like La Via Campesina are indispensable. Yeah, because it already, La Via Campesina has shown that it's able to mobilize, to make experience travel from one place to another, to organize solidarity, to develop new agendas, and even to, this is very interesting, to enrich even scientific debate. Yeah, food sovereignty now is a concept taken very seriously, even more after the pandemic, after the stupid financial crisis we had, after this awful war in the Ukraine. Yeah, it's now, food sovereignty is everywhere on the agenda. It was first ridiculized. And so that's a very important contribution. It's also one of the driving forces between agroecology. So yes, going from the simple towards from the first point to this last point, we need indeed organizations as I mentioned, as La Via Campesina.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for this multifaceted inspirational talk. I would like to ask a bit on this slide to distinguish a little bit more between entrepreneurial farms and peasant farms. I think what you described from the peasant farmers is very much an entrepreneurial activity, namely creating a market for agroecological products. So, yeah, more in the broader field of also in other sectors, there is literature about sustainability entrepreneurs, and I wonder whether agricultural sustainability entrepreneurs would be something that relates to, that can also envision activities, how to nourish, how to develop agroecology further. Thank you. Thank you
for that question. That's a good entrance to raise 2 points. First of all, I noticed that the radical left, me included, has always had difficulties in understanding the market. Yeah, normally we react as following this scheme. The market is evil because the market is part of capitalism, and so we should stay away, far away from the market. because then we are on the wrong track. I finally discovered also in debates and discussions and struggles in many parts in the world that it's not as simple as that. The problem is what is governing the markets and who is appropriating the value that is contained in the markets. Yeah, and that is the crucial question. Is it capital? Are it the big food empires governing the markets? And what kind of markets are they constructing? Or are there different modalities, different possibilities? Yeah, and the answer is yes. And that is exactly why the movements construct in various parts of the world so-called peasant markets, which imply direct exchange between producers and consumers, better products, good quality, fresh products, and products with a story. And the nice thing is that these peasant markets in many parts of the world also become, well, a solid foundation for new coalitions. And then you only have to go to Rome, for instance, to see in the Mercati Contadini, the peasant markets over there. Yeah, they sell at prices lower than supermarket level. And they can do so because there is no intermediary. It's not true that necessarily peasant markets are to be more expensive and are only for the rich. There are many experiences that show the opposite. So probably peasant markets, or as La Via Campesina calls it, territorial markets, to distinguish it from the global market governed by big capital, is probably not a bad way. It's probably not a bad strategy in the struggle and in the way ahead. Then what is the difference between entrepreneurial farms and peasant farms? Or you can also say industrialized farms and more peasant-like farms. Because peasants can also be very entrepreneurial, of course. Yeah, like the English expression goes, they are like the early birds that pick the worms. Yeah, in the early morning, they are very eager, of course, very motivated to use opportunities to improve their livelihoods, to improve production. But I'm referring here to not as a personal attribute, but to a structural feature. Entrepreneurial farming, entrepreneurial agriculture is based on and dependent upon massive flows of commodities. Yeah, they need to acquire a lot of growth factors because they do not use nature. On the other hand, peasant farms have an autonomous resource base, do not need these endless commodity flows, and part of this autonomous resource base, self-governed resource base, part of it is nature. And they develop nature, they cherish nature, they care for it. Now, if you want other keywords in entrepreneurial farming, it is technology and capital, credit, that is crucial. Yeah, without these two elements, it cannot proceed, it cannot continue, it cannot expand. Whilst in peasant agriculture, two other elements are crucial. Yeah, the pillars of peasant agriculture are nature and farm labor, peasant labor, the labor of the involved people themselves. Yeah, there is the centrality of people. That is also why in this first slide, I refer to different types of agriculture, and you see time and again the centrality of labor, the centrality of people, who are involved in the process of production, who are gaining an income, who are building a specific identity, who are motivated to go ahead. Yeah, labor is essential, just as the natural resources. Yeah, this is co-production in a nutshell, which is very different from the type of agriculture that came out of green revolution in the global south and modernization processes in Europe. I hope this helps to respond a little bit to your question. Then we had an appointment.
Yes.
as usual, fascinating talk, and yes, lots of very good illustrations that you have given. But you kept saying that it's a promise which sort of is not realized as yet, in a sense of its significance. Yeah, and you very easily agree on that. Forget about some of those sort of typologies that we're talking about. You clarified it very well, that why you make this distinction between entrepreneurial and peasant. But you, as you said, that very large segments of peasants have actually been captured by industrial farming and so on and so forth. So some issues will remain there, which probably we need to hash out much more, maybe in subsequent conversations. The question which I wanted you to reflect on a little more is, what, in your view, are some of the most powerful systemic challenges to what you have called peasant agriculture? Economic, political, cultural, because you've been engaged with these issues now for decades. And it would be good if you could sort of flag some of those in terms of your priorities, what must be done. And you talked of Flavia Campesina and some of these movements, sure. But I guess there's a lot more to it. And one of the very first books which I had read on about 3 decades ago on sort of this very persuasive case for peasant farms and so on was the One Straw Revolution. It's a Japanese farmer who actually had, way on. Okay. And some of the things that he was talking about could very well be kind of clues to these systemic challenges and how he fought those challenges and so on. So I thought it would be interesting for you to expand on the ideas, very, very useful ideas which you have put on the platter. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for this invitation to develop the exposition a bit further. I assume that there might be a possible provocative element as well, that if I bring to the fore certain elements, you will strike back. But anyway, that's part of the joy. Now, first thing, of course, is that it is not so that we have simply one segment clearly delineated of entrepreneurial agriculture and another element of pure, chemically pure. Well, that's ironical, of course, when talking about this, but chemically pure peasant agriculture. It is not two separated blocks, clearly distinguishable. Yeah, there is a huge intermediate zone, a gray zone. And as you noticed, for instance, this Hoeksma farm I talked about, is in this gray zone, moving in it, is step-by-step way. Now, there is a lot of movement in this gray zone and between the opposite poles. And the analytical keywords that are normally used are depeasantization and repeasantization. Yeah, meaning agriculture becoming less peasant-like, less built as co-production versus repeasantization. Yeah, making it again more structured as co-production, etc. All these things I told about. Now, this is the first very important thing. What makes repeasantization and depeasantization, what drives it? What are the engines? And of course, here capital plays a very important role. People getting dependent of banks, of agribusinesses, of the message of extension services, of the routines. Also, sciences played a very important role in this. Agricultural sciences. I'm from Wageningen University. Yeah, it has been and still is one of the motors of one of the engines, one of the driving forces of modernization, of moving towards an industrial agriculture. Yeah, and what it is doing actually in the nitrogen crisis is promoting all kind of crazy technologies that are supposed to be a solution for the nitrogen crisis. Yeah, I will not go into details because you would die of laughter if I would explain all the details, but we are involved in crazy races, technological rat races ahead that will not function anyway. So there is depeasantization, there is repeasantization as well. And in these processes, these are richly checkered, they are multifaceted, many dimensions are involved, sometimes more the emphasis on this and other times on that. I know young farmers who, talking about the young people in agriculture, who say, I have a lot of respect for my father and mother, but I will myself not enter in the morning into the barn with 2,000 pigs and enter and leave at the end of the working day. Yeah, not seeing anybody. The entrepreneurial farmer became a person that is very alone. He's alone in the fields, alone in the milking parlor, and it's a very monotonous life. So this young man, together with his wife, they decided, let's restructure it. Let's have outdoor pig breeding. Yeah, these pigs are being outside, getting new breeds. The Bentheim variety, the Bentheim race, for instance, is one of their favorites. You have strange animals here I remember from another part of Germany. Well, originally it's from Hungary. Pigs that at the same time have a skin full of wool. I first thought, well, this is Frankenstein himself that made these animals. But that's also another type of interesting pig. So they changed over. So this is cultural. This is very much tied with life, with the body, with dreams of people, and sometimes it are other dimensions, of whatever nature. I think that we are in a period of young people increasingly discovering the beauty and the attractiveness of agroecology, which is inspiring a kind of further repeasantization. And on the other hand, the industrialization and the associated depeasantization increasingly turns out to be a dead-end road. Offering less prospects and less joy to the people. Let me give, because I do not want you to think that I'm talking only about romantic ideas. As a matter of fact, it's true. You know, agroecology is a Dornröschen. Wie sagt man das in Deutsch? Yeah. And she's still asleep, but might wake up. Nonsense. I showed you this image of the landscape of the northern Frisian woodlands. And they are having a territorial cooperative. And if you look to the last 30 years, the last 3 decades, then in the Netherlands as a whole, the number of dairy farms was reduced with 67%. In this area, where people operate through the cooperative, it is as low as 21. So it's a remarkable, significant difference. Yeah, it turns it, and this shows that that joy and fighting in elegant ways, negotiating, building your own, or at least building parts of your own future, translate into material facts as the continuity of farms, the persistence of peasant agriculture. So it's all in the game. If this can be strengthened by supportive state policies, this can be strengthened by science that knows what it has to do. If this can be strengthened through movements as La Via Campesina, the better it is. Yeah, but in itself already, it's having momentum. That's my point.
There are three very patient people in the chat that I would like to read out their questions. They're relatively short. So the first one is this peasantness, is it necessarily focused on family farm, or feminist or collective farming structures captured by that term? The second is based on this image of the Chinese woman using the kind of technology to enhance her autonomy. What's this relationship between peasantness and peasant type of technology? And the third one is probably a big one. So, do you have any cure against right-wing populism in agriculture?
Can you repeat the last one?
What would be your cure for this emerging right-wing populist moment?
Well, on this last question, I can be short, fight them. But by fight them, and I already have been clear in which respects this can be done. Is peasant agriculture, is peasantness coinciding with family farming? No, it's not. The one is not the identical to the other. Yeah, family farming in the end is a legal notion that points to who owns the farm and who is involved in the labor process and who is managing the farm. And to all these three questions, the answer is it's the family. It's a farming family. Yeah, the farming family owns the farm. It's doing the work, and it is taking the major decisions. With gender equality or without it, whatever you have. Yeah, but that's the family farm. Peasant agriculture refers to the labor process, the production process, how it is structured. Yeah, how land, meadows, pasture lands and animals are combined. Yeah, how animals are cared for. What's the relation between labor input and the available animals and the available land, and so on and so forth. That refers to the way of farming. And peasant farming, peasant agriculture is a specific type of agriculture, and those who are involved in it are peasants, yeah? You define peasants not by intrinsic qualities, as being stupid or being very clever, and that's not the issue. You define them through what they are doing. Yeah, and what they are doing is practicing peasant agriculture. As a French paysan once said to me, "Moi, je vive de la terre, and that's I'm living from the land, and that's why I'm a paysan. I'm a peasant." Yeah, as simple as that. Now, of course, mostly peasant agriculture is organized through family farms, but not necessarily. For instance, in Peru, for a long time, it were peasant communities, yeah, and that developed even kind of collective production units, unidades comunales de producción, yeah, where many people were together. Yeah, and they reached very beautiful results. You see increasingly in Europe as well that new organizational forms are created, not the family forms, but brother and sister working together, or a group of young women working together, of whatever there is a dazzling range of new expression, new organizational forms. Some function well, others not. Anyway, that is all part of the game. So, and I think that probably in the future, the phenomenon of the family, also through all kinds of demographic developments, the family and the family farm will become less dominant, and many new farms will emerge. And the interesting thing is that you see that agroecology is a kind of laboratory in which these new farms are tried out. I know a farm very well in the Netherlands. It's called the Zonnehoeve, the solar farm. It's of the family. It used to be of the family van IJzendoorn, but they changed it into a kind of commons, so that young people can flow in, learn the job of running an agroecological farm, obtain savings, and then start themselves with a new unit of production. So this is a kind of commons that at the same time operates as an agroecological school and is a first instrument for helping others to start farming when they do as yet not have land. So this is all very interesting. In this sense, agroecology is also very, very interesting and promising because it allows, it needs, it develops these new forms.
Can you hear me like this? Can you hear me like this? I would like to see the thing of the young corporations to farming, and for me the question is how to balance, or what is your view on how to balance the equilibrium between labor and simplification or mechanization, because they are really tough jobs, you know. I'm a shepherdess myself, and I have experience to be exterminated, no, and how to encourage other people to say, yeah, come, it's fantastic, it's wonderful. Well, it is, but it's really tough, and that many people are willing to do it, no? So how to balance this with also with the fossil fuel crisis, and how, and for me it's important also this technology sovereignty. No, the technology itself is not bad, but how we use it, who can access it, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, and this reminds me of another question that was on the chat about the Chinese peasantry and technology. And it reminds me what you said earlier this afternoon when talking about Indonesia. Yeah, that well, it's not meant. I mean, a tractor is a nice thing. Yeah, when you can work the land with it, so that you do not have to do it digging. I mean, that makes a huge difference. If you go to this Chinese lady, for her, this electric tractor is really a vehicle of emancipation. Like for instance, these three-wheel tractors in Italy, these ugly things. Some of you know them. They are called api, like a bee. Yeah, and they make the sound of a bee. Yeah, well, it has very much helped to dynamize peasant agriculture in Italy immediately after the war. Yeah, and this electric one is the api now of China. Yeah, you need a good, adapted, adequate technologies as much as possible. Now there are laborsome tasks in organic farming, in agroecology, like weeding. Yeah, that's a backbreaking activity, but there are other backbreaking activities as well. I can assure you. they are not nice. It's difficult to find the labor force willing to do it. Within the family, often there is not enough labor force. Now, and there it goes that we have to construct, design new technological solutions. The point is that this is not done anymore by the existing machine industry, nor by the universities having faculties or special groups oriented at mechanization. Yeah, in their designs, they built in the assumption of large-scale operations, high use of fossil energy, no limit on cost, because credit is assumed to be taken by the entrepreneur. So the kind of technology that is being designed and produced absolutely is not fitting the current needs of agroecology. And here is a huge task for let me put it simple, for young engineers, together with experienced farmers, women, yeah, defining clearly what is the problem, what do we need, yeah, and then look for possible solutions. And then it's also very useful to travel, to see how problems, the same problem is attacked, is resolved in other localities. Yeah, it was even that in the past was the role of science before the current technocratic agricultural sciences. We had classical agronomy, and classical agronomy was very simple. It was about what farmers were doing in different places. Yeah, and this classical agronomy was a kind of communication channel between different countries, between different localities. Yeah, they observed, hey, in Denmark, they are producing cheese in a far more hygienic way than was the case at that time in, for instance, Friesland. So they made the peasant solutions from Denmark travel to Friesland, not to impose it, but to say, hey, you should take seriously into consideration this possibility and maybe experiment with it. Yeah, and that worked very well. And these were thought it was very interesting, the walking professors. Yeah, because they walked from one village to another and from one country to another, just observing, talking. And classical agronomy, to a large degree, was based on them and their work. China, for instance, was absolutely fascinated by these walking professors in Italy, in Switzerland, in Germany, in the Netherlands. He referred to them. And in designing these new solutions, they simply started from the reality of the existing farms. Yeah, and when it came to cheese making, for instance, the identity of the farm women involved in it, yeah, and not assuming that all this should be changed, but how can we make solutions that fit into the existing realities and correspond with the needs and possibilities. So that is, developing this kind of things is very important.